All right, guys, welcome back to Establish the Pass podcast presented by Clutch Points. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. With me, as always, my co-host, Dillon Reagan, and we're back here to discuss the NFL schedule. We're going to break down every single game for the entire season. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. We can't do that. We will as we get to the season, right, Dylan? But we just maybe not right now. So, yes, but the schedule officially released and. Just for full reference, we're doing this a few minutes before the full schedule is released, so we will probably, again, we're not going to be able to hit on everything, but we will kind of give you the highlights, looking at sort of the best games, some of the rookie matchups as well, some of the guys who were drafted the highest, of course, quarterbacks involved there, revenge games, just kind of looking at just how some of these schedules match up just from a weekly standpoint and some of the things that stand out overall. Of course, Dylan, we'll kind of go more into the schedules as we get into the offseason a bit more and really start to look ahead to September. But for now, what we do know is that the season will start in a very interesting way because when I saw this, I sort of had to do a double take because I'm like, oh, yeah, the Lions are starting the season. Because that's just one of those things that I feel like we don't see often to have the Lions kind of in that type of setting, but it is fun to think about. You and I have talked about the Lions sort of making their rise here, but the Chiefs and the Lions will officially sort of kick things off. And so on Thursday, September the 7th, so I think that's kind of a fun little nugget to start off with. Having the Lions kicking off the season, Detroit is back, baby.
One of the best games, a late night game between the Chiefs and Rams back in 2018. Be great to see these two teams go back and forth. I think the Lions have made a lot of improvements. Obviously, with the way the offense has been, I think their offensive line's in a great place. I think Goff, as we know, when he has the right situation in play, he can succeed. But yeah, it was interesting because you look at some of the other teams that we knew were going to be on the home schedule for this Chiefs team that you thought may have been in place there, but it made maybe a little more sense last year when you had, we kind of imagined what could have been with the Bills-Rams Super Bowl, with that being the Week 1 first kickoff game. Obviously, the Rams getting blown out in that one, but this one a little more exciting, but not in a bad way. A game that I was really excited to watch, and now I'm excited will be a standalone game, not one that I have to watch crammed together with like 10 other games at the same time.
Yeah, these are two teams that, again, are very interesting spots. Obviously, the Chiefs coming off the Super Bowl win, but the Lions have been a team we talked about definitely on the rise, and especially when we look at that division heading into the season. It'll be interesting to kind of break down that division and see maybe where we put the Lions. So, kind of an interesting situation there. All right, anything that stands out to you as we start to dive into this, because you've got the Super Bowl rematch in Week 11 between the Eagles and the Chiefs, so that's one that people will circle just based off of that. You look at some of the other, as we said, we don't have the full schedule just yet as we're looking at it, but the Tom Brady situation, he'll be back for the, Patriots game against the Eagles in Week 1, so that's certainly a big storyline right off the bat as well. And then I know Dylan will probably... The Jets will be a team that once we kind of look at everything, they'll be a team that will obviously have a lot of attention on them from a national, sort of primetime type situation too, just given the fact that Aaron Rodgers is there now. So they'll be, and they're also, I think they're the Black Friday game too, right, against the Dolphins.
Yep.
So yeah, like the Jets will be a team that'll be talked about quite a bit, and they're going to have a pretty fascinating schedule, just again, depending on where some of those games wind up. But I think those are just some of the initial things that stand out.
Yeah, the hype for the Jets is definitely real. Their schedule, I think, just when we started recording, did leak out a bit early here. So we have six standalone games, 5 primetime plus that Black Friday that you mentioned. You mentioned the Week 1 against Buffalo on Monday Night Football. That's going to be a lot of fun to see Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers dueling. We got to see the Packers play the Bills this past season, but a little different circumstance in the same division where they're going to be facing off a couple times in all those games. I mean, the whole AFC talk about the discrepancy between the conference's quarterback play when you flip Aaron to the AFC was already loaded with all these young quarterbacks, just ridiculous. But we also get the Jets Week 4 Sunday night against the Chiefs, a Monday night game against the Chargers in Week 9, another Sunday night game the following week against the Raiders in Week 10, the team that could have potentially traded for Aaron if they had wanted him over the Jets. And then Thursday Night Football all the way in Week 17 against the Browns. And then, you mentioned the Black Friday game against the Dolphins. So 6 standalone games for the Jets. Pretty pretty ridiculous when you think about it, honestly. But at the same time, probably worthy because everyone wants to see what Aaron's going to do. It's one of the stories going into the season for a good reason. He seems rejuvenated. Hair, this is my own opinion. His haircut looks a little bit better, a little more cleaned up since he made it to New York. He's been going to a lot of Knicks games and seems to be refreshed by a nice piece by ESPN and their team, kind of about his headspace about the whole trade, and he kind of compared it to like the feeling of when he first left for Cal and getting into his dorm room and having like a similar kind of experience mentally when he kind of finally got settled into his new place there. I'm not sure if it's in New Jersey, New York, but yeah, obviously one of the biggest storylines of the season with the Jets there. We'll see how good they are. I think their defense is going to be great, but so I would, in terms of like best games or games I'm most looking forward to, put that week 1 game against the Bills. I know it's going to be pretty early on. We're not going to have the fully fleshed out version of what both teams can become, but it'll be a good benchmark kind of game for the Jets to see, all right, where are we? Do we think, the Bills are going to be, even with bit of a setback in the divisional round last year, still considered one of the best teams in the entire NFL. If they can take them down on Monday Night Football, I mean, the hype machine's going to only go crazier in the Big Apple, obviously. In terms of, games that I would put in that best game or games I'm looking most forward to, I mean, all the matchups between the teams that won their divisions in the AFC that automatically face off as a result of that. I mean, we'll get the 5th matchup between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Mahomes finally getting the upper hand in the last one, but we know that one's always going to be a great game and a possible playoff preview. Obviously, seeing if the Bills can get revenge on the Bengals after a pretty disappointing game. I think they only end up scoring 10 points in the divisional round. Not the usual offense output of Buffalo. They got some new weapons for Josh. They got to cut now. They're gonna have a lot more 12 personnel probably with Dalton Kincaid and as more of a receiving tight end, and Dawson Knox doing his thing with the weapons they have. I'm excited to see what that team kind of looks like. And then the Jaguars, seeing them face off against the Chiefs. They almost could have won that game, obviously, a year ago in the playoffs. Not even a year ago, only a few months ago. And I to see as they continue their build and seeing as now it's not making that leap, it's maintaining it and seeing if Jacksonville can go from just a playoff team to at this moment, clearly, in my opinion, the best team in that division, to being an actual Super Bowl contender. So how they fare against Cincinnati, how they fare against Kansas City and Buffalo, all those matchups are some of the games I'm looking the most forward to, along with, it's easy to say this, but they were two of the easily the 2 best teams in the NFC last year, the Eagles and Niners, and I don't have much reason to think that won't be the same case this way. I have a lot of optimism for Dallas as well, and I do think those Dallas-Philly games that are on the schedule are 2 that I couldn't be more excited for. I think at this point, with Aaron out of the conference, it's hard for me to say that there's not that Dak and Jalen are probably the best 2 quarterbacks in the entire conference. I don't even trying to think of who the third guy would be. I'm not trying to, go too far the other way with my Rams bias by automatically putting Brock Purdy way too high up there after what he was able to do. I end up kind of going backwards almost too far against the teams that I don't root for. But I'm honestly, I don't know. That's probably a separate question. Who we think the top 5 quarterbacks are in the NFC. I think you could probably name an interesting group, and depending on your opinion, after. In my opinion, probably Jalen and then Dak. But I think those games will be a must-see TV as well. So it's really fun. I mean, we knew these matchups were going to happen, obviously, but seeing when the games are going to happen, kind of starting to mentally get into your mind what the schedule is going to look like. It's a lot of fun, and I mean, maybe 2 guys I'm the most excited to see what they can do, because I just don't know. What they're going to do at the NFL level yet, and one of them's been in the NFL for a few years. That's Jordan Love. I'm really intrigued by the whole Packers schedule did leak already, so that they get week 1 at Chicago, seeing against Justin Fields, seeing what he can do with more weapons of an improved offensive line there. Jordan Love looked pretty good in a few snaps against the Eagles when he had to come in for an injured Aaron Rodgers this year, but I think some of those games could be potentially really fun to watch. And then a guy that actually hasn't been in the NFL, Bryce Young. I mentioned, well, we can kind of get into some rookie things we're excited for next, but I think, just the Panthers in general, it wasn't a team that for a number of years here has been one that is mentioned when we talk about the schedule release or any of our teams we're most excited to watch, but with a lot of new weapons there, new coaching staff, and just obviously loved watching Bryce at the college level, and I think with how I'm just excited to see how cerebral he is and smart and things he can do. It's going to be an adjustment period, but I think guys that are that strong above the neck usually are able to translate quicker to the NFL level. So I won't be. Maybe it won't be. Looking at the Panthers, not a lot of Panthers games are out yet, but I do think once we see that full slate, I'll find some games that I'm really excited for Bryce Young to see what he can do in his rookie season.
Yeah, there should be quite a few of those. We said just kind of looking at especially the rookie quarterbacks and kind of what stands out with them, and so that'll kind of be fascinating to look at. And certainly, as we said, there will be some different. I'm just looking at like the whole picture here, and like there are just some quirky things on the schedule. I think one of the things noted was the Cowboys and the Seahawks are going to play back-to-back Thursdays. So they kind of it looks like that's going to be kind of an interesting setup because I think it's the Seahawks and the Niners play on Thanksgiving, Cowboys and Commanders play, and then the Cowboys and the Seahawks play the following Thursday. So it's that's kind of that late season thing there. And one of the things you talked about, I thought Jets Raiders, in a primetime top matchup just makes sense because you've certainly got Aaron Rodgers on one side, Devontae Adams on the other. That was one that I thought was pretty good, just encircling some of these others. And also there was I saw the Bills and Chargers, Week 16. It's going to be on Peacock. So, this is the way of the future, as we know, Dylan. There are going to be these games that are just exclusive to these streaming services, and we've seen that, obviously, with the, Amazon stuff and stuff now, but it's just, that's a Saturday game. Looks like Albert Breer put that out this afternoon. So, yeah, so there's just, again, you go through this entire schedule and point out a lot of different things, but those are just among the group of interesting spots in terms of just the different quirks of the schedule, I guess you could say.
Yeah, the back-to-back Thursdays. I guess it makes sense if you're already playing, with the holiday there with Thanksgiving. Might as well just kind of double it up and make it work a little bit easier. But and obviously, like you said, the Jaguars playing twice in a row in London too. That's something that we could maybe get used to. It's the fact that they can now move team. That's the thing that's interesting about this too. We've known for a while that the Sunday night games late in the season could be flexed out if the matchup ends up not being that exciting. But now that Monday night games can be as well. I hope it's going to create some nightmares for fans that have to plan out trips for traveling to these games. I think if you're a fan of any team that's maybe borderline not a contender and you're looking at a Monday night game late in the season, maybe wait to on the road that you're going to have to travel to, maybe wait to buy those tickets or at least get some fan insurance, depending if you buy from StubHub or wherever you buy from. Because, that's something that as we see this come out, I'm already like, is this game going to look as solid as it does then? So those are some of the things that I like to look at too, and the fact that teams can play multiple Thursday night games, not even if they're back to back in some cases, right? I think in some cases they just could now play 2 Thursday night games at any point in the schedule. Interesting. I guess you can prepare for it. I'm sure they're going to keep in mind some level of fairness to this, but it always feels like some team feels like they get the short end of the stick with these kind of things, inevitably, no matter what you do. Yeah,
that's just the way we're going. I know if you haven't watched the video, if you go to YouTube and search for NFL schedule, whatever, just put how it's made. Mm-hmm. Fascinating videos on how this schedule is put together, and it's pretty cool just to kind of see what they do and how early this process starts every year, just to try to figure out how to put the schedule together and all that. It's pretty interesting. CBS Sports had something I thought was a very good stat, and if you're looking at the schedules, if you see your team's favorite schedule, they have who has the easiest schedule, who has the hardest schedule, and it's mostly just based on the previous year, right? Which again, it's not the perfect way to necessarily gauge it, but if they use it by that, the Eagles would play the toughest schedule. But the two teams that are play the easiest schedule would be the Saints and the Falcons. Now, that's important for this reason, and I didn't realize the stat, but they do have a stat here in this article that past 7 seasons, the team that has either had, the two easiest schedules one of those teams has always made the playoffs the past 7 seasons. So
That's insane.
Yeah, that is kind of a wild one, isn't it? So, over the past 7 years, and I'm looking at this article, at least one team playing one of the 2 easiest schedules has made the postseason. That trend stands. Yeah, it'll be either the Saints or the Falcons will make the playoffs, or it could be both. But listen, we're talking about the NFC South, right? So who knows? As we said, what an interesting division that's going to be. That may be the new brand for us moving forward, because I have no idea what to expect with that. But again, there's just so many. And speaking of that, I mean, you've got the Panthers and the Texans. Obviously, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud. I mean, that's another one you circle if you're just looking at, just sort of the rookie aspect of it. And of course, we'll see more of those come out as well. I mean, who knows? Eventually we could get an Anthony Richardson, Will Levis matchup. I don't know if that's going to happen right away, but who knows what happens with the Titans? But so those are just some of the ones that they kind of stand out.
Yeah, we know we got built in with the Stroud and Anthony Richardson matchups in that division that we are pretty confident about. Like you said, we'll see if Will Levis gets some run as a rookie. There's a chance we're going to have 3 rookies starting in the same division at some point in the season, which was pretty nuts to think about. Maybe I know we mentioned the NFC South last year, like you're saying, becoming our new brand. But if we have 3 rookies in our AFC South, we might have to hold on to them and enjoy that. But the fact that you get the crossover with, I think that's I don't know if there's a crossover with. There is. I guess the Souths play each other this season, which is fantastic because Anthony Richardson does play Bryce Young too. So we could have quite a few.
So this is why. I was gonna say. So this is why, according to CBS, like the 6 teams with the easiest schedule: Panthers, Titans, Colts, Texans, Saints, Falcons. That's why, because they play each other. So there you go.
That's gonna be. I mean, I'll make for some competitive games. I do think the Jaguars will obviously benefit from that the most, but in the as we talked about a little last week, I think the Panthers, and I mentioned them again, I'm excited to watch what Bryce can do, but I'm also just excited to see what Frank Reich does in his first year there with the roster that's really, they've just the fact that they're able to actually figure some things out last year they can build on with the offensive line and the running game, and regardless of personnel, I think hopefully they can hold on to some of those what they're able to build. But I think in terms of like the best rookie games to kind of look at, obviously we want to see what these young guys can do when they face off against the top quarterbacks in the league that they're going to be competing with for years to come, but also just the matchups between them. So the Stroud, Bryce Young, obviously number 1 and 2 picks, good friends, both guys from Southern California that obviously went to the 2 biggest, you could argue, programs in the entire country, in Ohio State and Alabama, and now seeing what they are going to be able to do at the next level, that's going to be a lot of fun. But in the division, like you said, I think the most intriguing, if we get it, will be Anthony Richardson versus Will Levis, just because of the dynamic, as we talked about after the NFL draft, of the Titans having a chance to possibly trade up for Richardson and the Colts beating him to the punch there, or sitting tight, I guess I should say, and being able to still land Richardson at number 4. So kind of, it will be interesting to see that one would be just for, at least definitely for you with the local headlines there in Nashville. I feel like that one has a lot of intrigue, and probably right there with Bryce and CJ as the top rookie games that I'd be the most excited for.
What about some of the, I know you may have mentioned about like the revenge games. I mean, those are the ones that we always kind of circle. And as we said, I'm sure there's some we're just going to skim over looking at this. Yeah. But, I think when you look at just kind of some of the ones that we do know, obviously Niners and Eagles, that's week 13. You got the Dolphins and the Chiefs. I think we may have already mentioned that. That's week 9. That's in Germany. I think that's, as I said, like revenge games there. You could probably pick a lot of those. There's probably a lot of fan bases that think they're revenge games with a lot of teams that they're going to have on their schedule based on remembering a game from, 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. But, those are just a couple of ones, I guess, that sort of stand out when you're looking at the schedule there and how it kind of shapes up.
Yeah, there's some that I wish we could have gotten, because a lot of times when we do the revenge game thing, we look at the players more than the teams. I think in this case, the Niners and Eagles makes more sense because of how bitter the Niner players have been all offseason, with a lot of comments about that they played with 10 players because of the injuries to their quarterbacks. And obviously they dealt with a lot throughout the season before Brock Purdy got in there, and then losing both him and Johnson, and then him having to come back without his elbow basically working and trying to throw little dump passes. I do understand it, but yeah, given everything they've said, as Kyle Shanahan kind of said today, he's happy this game isn't going to happen until later in the season, because just he wants his team to be fully ready, but also, maybe emotions would be a little high if it started the season. Once you get into the full schedule, it'll be a little closer maybe to a normal football game. But I still think from the Niners' point of view, more revenge there than, say, even when they lost to the Rams in the NFC title game going into their 2 games this season, or this past season against them. I don't think they had the same revenge on their mind. Maybe the Cowboys do. They play the Niners on Sunday Night Football in Week 5. That could also go in for one of the best games of the season. I think that was just a classic in terms of what those defenses did in the divisional round and what we could be treated to again with those teams. But I think from the Cowboys' point of view, another one where it's back-to-back seasons now. Their season has ended at the hands of the rival 49ers. So a lot of revenge on their mind. A couple others that I'd marked down. I mean, there's ones I wish we could have gotten, like a Rodgers-Packers matchup. I don't believe the Saints are playing the Raiders, so a Derek Carr, that would have been a really spicy one if he'd been going back there. But a couple that we do have, it's a little delayed, but Devontae Adams, as you mentioned, with the Packers playing the Raiders, could have a little bit of a revenge factor in that one. The big one, though, Tyreek Hill, was talked up how excited he was for the Dolphins to be going to Kansas City, and then they ended up throwing that game to, I don't know if it's Munich or which city. I think it was Munich, for the Dolphins at the Chiefs. So still for him, I mean, the Dolphins, really excited to see overall what that team's going to do. We know all the weapons they have. They get Fangio, they get Jalen Ramsey, they keep retooling that defense. So yeah, I'd have to, look through all these games to try to see if there's any more that really just jump out immediately. Those are the ones, though, those 2 for players. There's a lot of potential ones, even like you could have said the Niners playing the Raiders. I know they just played last year, so I'm almost positive they don't face again. For Garoppolo going against the team that kind of gave up on him, you could say, to an extent, in San Francisco. But those are the main ones that stick out for me, just at least what we have so far looking at the schedule.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs Dolphins, like you said, it would not anything against the atmosphere that there will be in Germany, but it just, it's just a different setup than what it would be if it was in Kansas City or something. It would just be a lot more interesting, I think, just for that revenge factor, just, that kind of 100%. Setup. But so that's kind of your setup there for those. I mean, I guess we kind of know the Week 1 games, like we said. We talked about the Chiefs and the Lions leading off. You've got, I guess looking at the rest of them, Patriots, Eagles is pretty fascinating. Bills and Jets, Monday night game. Cowboys and Giants, that's the Sunday night game. And just kind of going up and down the schedule here at the others. Panthers at Falcons, Titans at Saints. Raiders at Broncos, Bucks at Vikings, Cardinals at Commanders, 49ers at Steelers, Jags at Colts, Rams at Seahawks, Dolphins at Chargers. That's a good one, Dolphins at Chargers. Bengals at Browns, Texans at Ravens, and then Packers and Bears. So that's your Week 1 schedule. As we said, the Chiefs and Lions kick things off, but there's some pretty fun Week 1 matchups. And, I mean, look, like we said a minute ago, it's like, that Panthers-Falcons game may not be, the headliner, but, that's an important game for both of those teams because of, given the division. And as we said, it feels like a division that's pretty wide open. And so, those are the kind of games I think early on. Look, a team like the Broncos, right? It's like their first game, Sean Payton playing the Raiders at home, trying to get off the stink of what they did last year. That's a big game. And I know, you play a lot of them, but so there are some pretty fun storylines, I think, just right off the bat when you look at some of these. As we said, if you go beyond the rookie quarterbacks, some of those others, Niners at Steelers, that's a fun, Week 1 type game where you look at kind of what both those teams could be. And like I said, Dolphins, Chargers, I think that's one of the best ones. Then, the Bills and Jets will probably take center stage, just given everything there with Aaron Rodgers. But it's a pretty fascinating Week 1 schedule, I think.
Yeah, no, a lot, like you said, a lot of good matchups. I think, like you said, that Niners Steelers one's kind of sneaky. I may be,
Yeah.
and we have a number of months here to preview the whole season, but I might be a little high on the Steelers, not for maybe it's competing for a Super Bowl, but I think they could be a playoff team in a really crowded AFC. So, early in one, wacky things happened. The Bears beat the Niners in Week 1 last year.
That's true. I forgot about that.
Obviously,
Yeah.
there was a monsoon basically in Chicago that day, but a lot of good matchups. I think Jaguars Colts. I know I'm sticking to our brand, but I really am excited to see if Anthony Richardson really does start that first game against Trevor Lawrence. Seeing what he can do, seeing what Shane Steichen has up his sleeve. Are we going to have a Brian Dable situation where right off the bat with the Giants, we're like, all right, this looks different? Is that going to be the case in Indianapolis? I'm sure their fans are hoping that is the case. Titans fans won't be doing so much. Derek Carr's debut against the Titans could be pretty intriguing to see what the Saints offense looks like. I know that you can say whatever you want about Derek Carr, but maybe he's, in an NFC, suddenly doesn't have to worry about so many other quarterbacks. He obviously is facing the Titans here, but in that game. But overall, Saints, low-key, as much as I've been hyping up the Panthers, maybe they feel like they still have something in the tank there. So every game in the AFC, first of all, feels like it's huge at all times this coming season, because I could talk myself into almost, not every team, but almost every team making the playoffs, just like I already mentioned with the Steelers. Like you said, Dolphins Chargers, that's a game that happened last year that ended up being really pivotal. Both teams got in the playoffs, but at the time it looked kind of like it might end up screwing the Dolphins before they were able to right the ship at the last second. Those are the games that you look back at that could end up playing a huge role, because, as much as I think the Dolphins will be really good, I still think the Bills are the standard in that division. The Jets obviously vastly improved, and the Patriots solid. So it's going to be a tough sledding. Miami has to find ways to win games against good teams like the Chargers, and same for them. Yeah, maybe this isn't the division that we thought going into last year, where like the AFC West is absolutely unstoppable. Is this the best division ever? We've moved very far past that, but like you mentioned, with the Broncos, maybe they could be completely different. We'll see what Sean Payton is able to do there. So, Bills Jets obviously takes the most intrigue. There's a reason it's a Monday night game. I'm glad it is as a standalone game. Cowboys Giants still should be obviously a great rivalry there. Maybe less allure just given the Giants are maybe not a known commodity. I think they'll still be solid this year, but maybe there is a little coming back to earth for that offense. But that's, I think, still the game I'm most excited for has to be in Week 1, Bills Jets, just by default. But a lot of fun games. It's going to be great when depending on, well, I guess now there is only one red zone, right? I think they moved from having the two with Siciliano and Scott Hansen. I think it's just Scott now. So I've been watching Scott for a while myself. So always excited for that first Sunday, even though it's September 10th. It might sound like it's far away. It's really not.
Never is.
It's really the start of the fact that players are going to be reporting in just over 2 months. It's kind of crazy to me. We already have the rookie mini camps, a lot of them this weekend. So, it's a schedule release. You do get this little break coming up here, but it's also a reminder that it's not quite as far away as it might kind of feel like at this time of year.
Yeah, one other note, and I don't think I realized this, but I saw it kind of, someone mentioned on Twitter that we may have already said this, but we've touched on so many things. I'm like, I don't know what we said and what we haven't said at this point. But the Packers, we talked about Aaron Rodgers earlier, but the Packers still have 5 primetime games as of right now. So that's going to be kind of, as I said, I think the Packers will be one of the more talked about teams, not just because they're the Packers, but we know Aaron Rodgers, that we have to mention the side for the Jets, but I think the Packers are going to be fascinating when you look at their schedule as a whole, because it is kind of like, we haven't seen this in so long, right? Like, it's just, this is like the biggest unknown for the Packers that we've seen in 2 decades, I guess, or so now. Like, it's really feels like that or more. And so, there is kind of a fascinating element of that too, just to kind of see, the Packers, again, as of right now, will have quite a few primetime games. And I'm looking at just their schedule. Let's see. So they play the Lions on Thursday night in Week 4. The Raiders, Monday Night Football, as we talked about earlier, Week 5. they play, let's see, what are the other primetime games? The Chiefs and Sunday Night Football in Week 13. So, like, they're not playing easy games here. They're playing the Giants, Monday Night Football in Week 14, and the Vikings at the Vikings, Sunday Night Football Week 17. So, yeah, I mean, it's not like they're playing, not to knock any of the bad teams, right? Like, those are all potential likely playoff teams, I guess you could say. And so, yeah, like that's kind of where things stand for the Packers. So you talked about earlier, I mean, talking about sort of Jordan Love and what we've seen. I mean, it's, yeah, right. Like, it's going to be interesting. So
they better start out well. Looking at the schedule,
yeah,
it gets tougher.
Yeah, you're right.
The beginning, there's winnable games for sure, but I mean, the Lions are obviously pretty competitive at this point. They think they're a playoff team. A lot of people do think they'll be in the postseason, but still, that first 9 weeks, the first 8 games, that's where they have to do work there. They absolutely have to, because after that, all the as you listed off all those teams, they have to beat those teams in the South, like the Falcons. They got to be able to beat the Rams later on. I feel like they can beat the Broncos. We'll see. Great. I mean, it's at the same time as for Green Bay fans, it might be a little tough going from the certainty that you've had for basically 2 decades, or even further than that, for the entirety of Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre's career. You have to remember in 2008 that when they moved to Aaron Rodgers, it was far from a sure thing. Maybe there was a little more positive feel and a few more game reps that we'd seen from Aaron. He had that in 2007 in relief of injured Brett Favre against a really good Cowboys team, played great. Maybe that's kind of that'll be this version of the Eagles-Packers game that we kind of alluded to for Jordan Love. But it has to be some part of it that's excited if you're a Packers fan. At least I would think. You've had, at this point, yes, it was great that with Rodgers, after kind of having that lull in the 20s, 17, 18 kind of era where they missed the playoffs a couple times, then they get Matt LaFleur to have the MVP seasons in those years, and they were great runs, but it just kind of got stale to the extent of like it just couldn't quite get over the hump. And it didn't feel like, obviously, after what happened last year, maybe looking back, the time that it's hard to know exactly when it's never easy to give up on a franchise legend like Aaron Rodgers, and not even that they gave up on him, but move on from him. Maybe they did it a year late, given what happened last year, not making the postseason and how it kind of looked throughout the year, a little discombobulated. But now I think there's optimism. They're one of the youngest rosters in the league, but they still have a really good offensive line. And that's the thing that I think, when you look at for Jordan Love's chance at success, he's had tons of time to work behind Aaron Rodgers. That already is going to help from the mental aspect and how you see the game, his footwork, from what you saw in that game, but also what a lot of Packer beat writers have talked about. I mean, it's just like drastically different from when he first got drafted to where it's at now. So, and the defense has pieces. It's still not great probably, but it has a good depth, I think, and it's just the offensive line that comes back to me. Skill position wise, they have a lot of guys with a lot of potential that look really good, but we don't know for sure what they're all going to become and what they can be. So it's a young group, but it's an exciting group, and I think for the Packers, it's just a different feel. But it's not like you're completely just falling off and like calling it. Like maybe you don't know if you're going to make the playoffs, but in the NFC, it's possible for sure. But I do think there's a lot of excitement, and there should be. And I hope that even though it's not going to be at times as confident going into every week that you're going to be getting a W, I hope that the fan base there is able to kind of look into this and have fun with and support Jordan Love. And I think they will. But yeah, the fact that they're still on so many primetime games and then also on Thanksgiving, I think it's just a testament to the fan base itself and the brand that even if the Packers aren't that good, I still think they're going to draw a lot of people in the stands and a lot of viewers. So they'll still be fun.
Yep. I think so. All right, Dylan, anything else that sort of stands out? Like we said, there's so... I mean, we really could go through the entire schedule and find a storyline somewhere, but, it just kind of, I think, sets up in an interesting way, as we said, with what we know, and it's just the NFL, right? Like we always say, it's like you can find a storyline anywhere when you look at all these games. But anything else sort of stands out to you before we wrap up?
Oh man, Not off the top of my head. I mean, it's hard to. There's just so many. What is it? 200. Well, even more now. 280 games or whatever it
Yeah.
is. We've kind of moved past the point of what it used to be like. I think there will be for the teams with the, like you mentioned, with the easier, maybe some teams that last year had really easy schedules that do not this year. I think that could be a wake up call. I mean, the fact that the Eagles have one of the tougher schedules after last year having the second easiest. I still think they're going to be great. I still think they're going to be completely fine. I still think they're going to probably be right there at the end of the tunnel, but I don't know if like the wins are going to come just pouring in the same way. So I mean that's the thing that I think overall with this is something that we knew before these schedules came out, but year to year difference in your strength of opponents, and obviously it's easy to. I like to personally obviously look at the not at last year's opponents. I like to look at the schedules based on their projected records more so this year because
Yeah.
it's really hard to look at the Jets. I mean, their defense is great and still should be great, but they have Aaron Rodgers now, so you can't look at those matchups with the Jets the same way. But it still kind of bodes down to for that division in the AFC East. As I kind of talked about, they're all really good, but they're also four of the seven toughest schedules projected.
Hmm.
That's the Eagles are a little bit further outside based on projection. So they're even though they have the hardest one based on last year's records, they're more in the middle of the pack for kind of how I usually look at it. But maybe that's something to look at. Maybe this division, the AFC East, that I think is going to be great. It's just you have to remember they're all beating up on each other. They're all in a really tough conference still. There's going to be really good. I think that's maybe the biggest takeaway overall for this upcoming season that I've kind of harped on about the AFC in particular. There's going to be good football. They're going to be 7-10. Like
Yeah.
it's someone's going to have to kind of take some of these losses by default. I guess they could just all tie each other constantly, but yeah, no other big takeaways at the moment. I think the NFL did a good job with some of the games it has picked for those premier moments, like we mentioned. Even though it's a little bit unorthodox pick with the lines in the week one matchup. I think it's a great one for the sport. It shows the strength of how the excitement around the Lions is built to a point where the NFL can put them in that week one game against the defending champions, and it doesn't feel like a completely out of touch decision. I think putting the Bills and Jets makes a lot of sense in that first Monday Night Football game. Some of these games on Christmas look like a lot of fun. The Thanksgiving games. I mean, a lot of parts of it. We'll see how it all works with the moving parts with the schedule, as we kind of go through it. But initial thoughts are, as always, it's going to be a lot of fun this season, and that the AFC East apparently is going to be just a bloodbath. That's my main takeaway, I guess, looking at this.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Yeah, like I said, we'll break them all down. But yeah, I think that's going to be a division we will be talking about a lot in terms of just the fun storylines and matchups between those four teams. But there you go. There are just some general thoughts on the schedule. And as we said, we'll talk more about these teams as we go throughout the offseason and look at these schedules more in depth as we get closer to the start of the season and really preview the 2023 season in the NFL. And Dylan, of course, it's all covered over at Clutch Points. Lots of reaction to the schedules that are out, everything else, so let everybody know where they can find all that.
Yeah, you can go to clutchpoints.com to the NFL section, also the NFL section of the Clutch Points app. We will have the full schedule by the time you're listening. This will be out, published on our site. We're going to go through. It might go through the weekend, but we're going to be breaking down game by game predictions for every team. I'm sure if someone compiled all of those predictions for all 32 teams, it would have an impossible above 500 record. It's a little more fun to. The same thing happens when you see, right? I'm sure on NFL Network shortly after the schedule comes out, you're going to see them going through game by game predictions. Same thing people have done in the past. You add those together, it doesn't all pan out, but it is still fun to kind of look through. So if you're a fan of the Steelers, fans of whatever team, we'll have all 32 eventually in there with those game by game predictions. And yeah, looking also just at the best matchups, the most exciting matchups for every team. We already broke down kind of the strength of schedule stuff we've talked about with our article at the top of our NFL section right now. So lots of good stuff, and yeah, we'll have more reactions. We'll go through all the player quotes. I'm sure there'll be some players reacting to the travel schedules again that they're not thrilled with. The Seahawks by default, as we talked about, will be one of those teams. But yeah, we got it all covered in the NFL section of the Clutch Points app and on our website at clutchpoints.com.
Yep, be sure to check it all out there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. As always, any podcast app you use, search for Establish the Pass. And thanks as always for listening to the podcast. And we'll talk to you next time here on the Establish the Pass podcast.